Good evening, all, and call to order the regular council meeting for Tuesday, October 6th, and need a adoption of the addenda. Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Scarrow, those in favor, opposed, motion carries. And adoption of the minutes from the regular council meeting of September 15. Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Reid, errors or omissions? None. Those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. And adoption of the minutes for the special council meeting of September 22nd. Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Reid, errors or omissions? None. Those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. And a report from the mayor. I was at a Okanagan Basin Water Board. You get the Okanagan Basin Water Board highlights when they we meet, and but the ones from the meeting this morning haven't arrived yet. They did a very good presentation by Sean Reimer on the criteria for lake level with climate change as such as it is, and the snowpack such as they get. And as he says, our biggest reservoir is our snowpack. It holds the water for us, but things are changing. And I have sent, I asked for the criteria that they adopt to sort of try to model or figure out what they can do with it. So you'll get that in your email system. And also the Stewardship Council, that's a part of an expert committee that is under the auspices of the Okanagan Basin Water Board, are doing a survey and study of potential and or looking at how much more water might be held in the upland lakes if it becomes something that it can do. It apparently, compared to Okanagan Lake and Cal Lake, the upland lakes have minimal capacity for holding lots of water, but if 30 centimeters or 30 cubic meters per second are coming into the lake and they can only release 12 cubic meters per second or whatever the time is, there's a disparity there that so if we can hold the inflow a little longer or in some greater way, and you can only do that upstream. So Vernon Creek, Mission Creek, Trout Creek are the three main tributaries to the Okanagan Lake system, and so that study will be very telling. I think we'll get to see that. So that's what was happening with Okanagan Basin Water Board. Announcements. Happily or unhappily, recently a long-standing committee member, Malcolm Mitchell, announced his retirement from the Water Service Advisory Committee. He was a long-term irrigation district member and took on chair of our water advisory after incorporation. Lake Country has really benefited by having Malcolm chairing the committee. He always has the greater community in mind when discussing recommendations on protection, supply, and distribution of water. He was never afraid to make hard decisions and recommend rate changes. Thank you, Malcolm, for your many years of volunteer service to the community and for sharing your experience and input on water. So I did send a thank you card from Mayor and Council and staff to Malcolm, but also want to make a public thank you for the work that is done. And that goes for all our volunteer committees for them. I don't know how you retire from volunteering, but what else do you call it? So but certainly he served us well, and so too have many others on our advisory committees. So the delegations and petitions, somebody speaking to that? This is rural and northern immigration pilot. Good. Introduce yourself. Turn your microphone on. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. Right, you can raise that. I think maybe it's as high as it go. The table, if there's a switch there somewhere, maybe
that's as high as it'll go. I'll try to lean in.
It lowers so people in wheelchairs can come to it. So.
All right, well, thank you for having me. My name is Ward Mercer, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Project.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay, or should I be leaning?
We can hear you, yeah.
Yeah? Okay, fantastic.
And it's not being broadcast, or is it? Yep, okay. And hopefully they can hear you at home, but maybe not across the nation, but.
Okay. All right, so I've been told that I have about 10 minutes,
yes.
So I will go through this relatively briefly. I have quite a bit of information I'd like to give you, and then we have questions at the end, obviously, and then I can answer any more questions in detail at that point or afterwards.
Very good.
So okay. I will, this is the agenda that I'll be going through with this presentation. I'll start off with the basics of the program, just so we all understand exactly how the program works, what it is, what it isn't, and then I'd like to talk about the process that we're doing in Vernon as the hub city for this community. And then I'll talk about our progress and then where we want to go from here with some of the COVID realities in mind and things of that sort. So I know there's a lot of information on here. I know you've also been provided it prior to this, so maybe you've read through it. But basically the gist of it is this program is a permanent resident economic immigration stream through the federal government. So this is not a temporary foreign worker program. This is not a spousal sponsorship. The goal of this program is to bring the economic benefits of immigration to smaller communities, to rural and northern communities. So 11 communities were chosen. Vernon was one of them. And we're each given 100 candidates that we can recommend each year for permanent residence. So they would apply to myself, and then they would go to our committee. And then if we recommend them, at that point, they apply for permanent residence. So that's kind of how it works at that point. The 100 candidates that we can choose are known as principal applicants. So if there's one person who applies and she has, a husband and 3 kids, then they would all come, but she would only count as the one spot. So that's how that works. The program also involves enhanced settlement services. So we do mentoring and matching. So when individuals come to the community, they're matched with someone in the same vocation or, same language capacity. And then at that point, they meet up for a year to try to create what the government calls a community hub. So it's the idea that we'll be really welcoming so that we can increase retention rates. You'll hear me say retention a lot because that is at the end of the day the goal here. Everyone we choose is supposed to, in theory, stay in the community for the foreseeable future. The pilot launched for us on February 1st. However, our authority to offer recommendations started on January 1st and will run for 3 years. The pilot itself lasts a little bit longer than that to collect data, but we can only do recommendations for that short period. So there are community level requirements and then there's the federal level requirements. So if we look at the federal level first, you'll notice, if any of you are familiar with the immigration programs that the government currently has, that some of the bars are actually a little bit lower than other ones. So if we look at it, the federal eligibility criteria would be here and then all the communities kind of build off of it as they see fit for certain industries and things like that. So for the federal level, we just need the high school, Canadian high school or the equivalent. You need a intermediate beginner language, a CLB4. You need 1 year of work experience within the last 3 years. You have to have the intention to reside within the community. And if you're coming from abroad, and meaning you're not applying within the community, you must show a certain amount of assets and income to be able to be eligible for the program. And obviously there's a lot more to it than that, but those are the main ones I'm bringing up right now. So we can also look at the job offer itself and the employer. So this is a key aspect here for a lot of industries in the Okanagan. They look for seasonal labor for a lot of different needs, but this program is not that. This program, as I said, is about bringing in people who want to live here for the foreseeable future. So with that in mind, the job offer must be permanent, it must be full-time, and it must be located within the community. So the next couple slides, I'll show the boundaries of the community, but the basic understanding of it is it's a 40-kilometer radius centered on the Community Futures office in downtown Vernon, which includes Lake Country, but it does not include any of the census subdivision of Kelowna. So I'll show that just in a second here. And then compliance, the employers must not be banned. And then the last one is the federal government has a wage requirement indicating that for certain positions, they can't be underpaid, basically. There's a wage range. As a community, we've actually added on top of that, but the basic idea right now is that the federal government has set an understanding of what a wage would be for, a position in this area. So this is the map that we've created at this point, and as you'll notice down at the bottom, there's a little bit of a cutout. So it's almost a perfect circle, except down on the southern boundary, and that's because we come up against the census subdivision of Kelowna. So I pulled this off of Stats Canada website and kind of zoomed in, so I know it's not perfect, but this is a general idea here, is that that's where the boundary is. I can tell you that the federal government is a little bit flexible on this, so if it was just over the line, it could work. And there's also discussions about extending the boundaries. And so we may do that in the future as well. So there's an international student exemption here, whereas if someone goes to the Okanagan College in Vernon, it's the only one that counts at this time, and they take a two-year program, they will be eligible for a international student exemption, which basically means that they do not have to have the 1 year of work experience. The idea is that they would come to the community, take the program, and then be able to work. They wouldn't have to wait a year to gain the experience. So there's an exemption there for international students. So if we look at the criteria that we developed in Vernon, so we put together a committee with about 11 different people, and we talked for months about this and argued back and forth, and we came up with a couple filters and a lot of priorities. So the way to understand this is a filter is as it seems. If you meet our qualifications, you go through, and if you don't, then you're filtered out. So these are kind of simple pass-fail metrics. So as you'll notice from the screen before or earlier, it was a CLB 4. So the committee has decided to raise it to a CLB 5, based a lot on the fact that English is very important in this area, less so than other communities. So they raised the minimum to CLB 5 instead of the CLB 4. Wage is the one that is the most controversial. The committee has decided to focus on higher skilled, higher wage positions. Again, this will hopefully lead to greater success of retention. So because of that, there is a mandatory wage of $25 an hour for anyone applying from outside of the community. If someone was in the community, they can get a job at $20 an hour to $24.99. That is up for discussion at a special meeting in the middle of this month, but that is the current reality as we have right now. And then the business establishment is at least 2 years of operation. There are some exemptions, but that's the general rule there. If we look at the priorities, this is our point system, heavily modeled off of the Express Entry comprehensive ranking system. So we look at different factors, and then we award certain points based on what we think is the most valuable to keeping them in the community. So age, if you are between 28 and 40, you get the most points. If you have a spouse who also works or has a job in the community, you get points. If you've worked in the same industry for a while, you get points. But the biggest one here is actually the family in the community and the work in the community. So those are the biggest data points showing that immigrants will actually stay in the community, is if they have family there and they've already been there. So it's, there's definitely a focus on the immigrants who are already currently here. So the process here, I'll just go through really briefly. This is about a 6-part process, and it's obviously more complicated than this, but I'll try to break it down simply. So if we look at eligibility, my job is to determine eligibility for the business first, the one offering the job offer. So they need to do a training with me. It's a brief training session where I walk them through everything necessary, and they sign an employer declaration form. The whole process takes about 20 minutes to half an hour, and then they go on the approved employer list. Then at that point, they're able to access the program as a business. And then I also have to look at the applicant who's received the job offer to determine if they're eligible. So I have to go through all their documents and ensure that everything meets the specs that the government has given me. So that's the first step. Second step is what we call posting a job. So we have a platform where it's mostly an applicant tracking software, but there also is a job board that we're hoping to expand over time. So there's two ways to post a job. One is to post a job for a vacant seat, or one is one for a employee that they already have. So the way it works is that if you don't have someone, we can post a job for you, and you also have to post it on a public site so that it doesn't subvert local labor. It just kind of supplements it. So we aren't looking to have jobs that are only available to foreign nationals. They must also be available to the public. So we make it mandatory that they advertise on Indeed or Kijiji at the job bank. So then we put it on there, and then I would work with them to try to find the right candidate as best as we could. And I can get into that more if we'd like after. And then with posting a job for an employee that is already there, we post an internal posting because I need to still associate someone with a job posting and move them through our tracking software, but it doesn't go public. However, we still require that they show us that they made the job available to the public prior to hiring the foreign national. So it's really important that we know that this isn't subverting the local labor market, especially during times of higher unemployment. So if we look at the job offer, we have to have this very specific form. It's a federal government form. So some businesses like to give me a job offer on just a normal sheet of their normal letterhead. It has to be this form. And then once that form is submitted with all the other documents, that is when the application is actually formally submitted. Some people say, well, I've already applied, but if they don't have the 4 key documents, the job offer, the language document, the work experience, and the education, then they haven't actually fully applied at that point. Our system will notify them when they submit all the necessary documents, and then they'll move into our candidate pool. So if somebody applies in October, they're in the candidate pool, and that's the intake period for October. They would be voted on in November. So it's a way that the government asked us to set up a system that it was fairly fair so that we could have a competitive ranking kind of pool. So because of COVID, we haven't had that many people in the candidate pool. So competitive ranking is an ideal situation, but at this point, there's only been 3 or 4 people who make it into the pool each time. So if we look at the processing and recommendation, our side of it can take as little as a couple weeks, 3 weeks to 4 weeks, or it can take 3 months, depending on if we need to do interviews and do a little bit of research behind their application. The federal government's permanent resident side of the application is actually 12 months, which is quite a long time, but it's quicker than some other permanent resident streams. What makes this a little bit unique is there's an optional work permit component where someone can come to the community within 4 months and begin working for their employer as their permanent resident application is in process. They can bring their family members and their children as well. So it's contingent on this application, but it doesn't require an LMIA if you're familiar with that. So it can be relatively quick and easy. And because it's processed in Canada, it hasn't been impacted by a lot of the processing delays other applications have been impacted by. And the last one, yay, they're in the community, they're permanent residents, and that's, at that point is when they're matched with individuals, and then we kind of monitor them to see if they remain in the community for a period after. So now I'm just gonna jump into the progress. I'm not sure how far along I am, but I'm almost done. So as of right now, this has actually been updated. I sent this before I updated it, so I apologize. It's now actually 14 principal applicants and 29 individuals in total. So the individuals are the spouses and the children that come with. And it's 9 different nationalities, including all the flags that you see there. And then there's Belarus, Mexico, and a couple other ones as well. We have some care aides, and again, care aides has a spelling mistake. Apologize for that. There's some carpenters, veterinarians, chefs, accountants. So we have quite a big variety in comparison to other communities who mostly have hospitality and customer service jobs. So that's where we are right now with the progress for the applicants. So the progress for the employers and the jobs. So we have roughly 36 approved employers who have gone through the training process and have signed the employer declaration form. And our numbers of candidate profile are actually closer to 15,000 people now. So we have people who have created a profile who are interested in coming to our community, but have not yet found a match when it comes to employment. So if somebody posts a job on there, then these are the people who would see it, and we usually have at least 500 people apply for each position that goes up. A lot of the industries, they vary, but again, healthcare, food services, a good variety of them. Now, if we look at our goals and objectives, this is my last slide before we open up the questions. My biggest one right now is to help the community understand the pilot. There is a misconception within the community, and there's a lack of understanding of what exactly this pilot is and who's also involved in the community. The way the federal government has set it up is it makes it seem like it's only Vernon, but it includes some other communities as well. So I'm trying to go around to all of the different communities on the periphery of our boundaries and explain the pilot to them. I hope that this will increase our recommendation numbers. So as of right now, we're about in the middle of the pack or kind of average when it comes to recommendations because of COVID-19, but we'd like to see our numbers go higher because we only have this opportunity for 3 years and we really want to take advantage of it as much as we can. To do that, we need more business participation. We are working on ways to kind of streamline the training process and to make it as easy as we can on businesses, and we're also retooling some of our criteria to try to help with business participation as well. So with those goals, we hope to increase our numbers drastically higher than we are now and bring more benefits of immigration to the community. And that's it.
Thank you.
All right.
Councillor Scarrow had a question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the goals and objectives. I concern myself with the process. This seems to be fairly arduous for an employer.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, could you highlight what the benefit to that employer is? And you know, kind of thing, because I'm thinking, like a lot of federal programs, the success is measured on the uptake. And I would be concerned about the uptake with the program.
Definitely. So what I'd say on that is that's a constant point of discussion on the committee, how we get to some of our goals and how we can get more businesses involved. So what we've done right now is we do one-on-one training sessions via Zoom, and I speak to the business owner and then they sign a declaration form, and then that's all they have to do at that point other than sign this one document. We've tried to streamline that process, and we're starting to get to a point where we're actually going to create webinars and online training to make it even more simple. The reason why we've done that is from other communities and other programs, most notably the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Project. They've indicated that a lot of businesses who started to utilize the program didn't fully understand how it worked and didn't understand some of the timelines and some of the constraints. So when we look at this program and some of the things we're asking, or that the federal government is asking of us, including creating a welcoming environment, it was heavily advised by the government that we speak to businesses along the way and try to create that relationship of understanding. So I definitely hear that point, and we're doing everything we can to take away those barriers and make it easier for businesses. Some of the barriers we can't take away because they're set by the federal government, but all of the community-based levels are constantly being re-looked at. And like I said, in the middle of the month, we may make it even easier and take away even more of those hurdles.
I guess the second part of my question was, at this point in the evolution of this program,
yes,
what is the benefit to the employer?
So I understand. So the benefit to the employer at this point is that they can keep their foreign national who's already working for them. They can keep them here either on a work permit or as a permanent resident, and it can be done faster than other programs, or some individuals can't apply for permanent residence at all. So as an example, if you have someone who's working for you and want to keep them here, you'll either have to keep getting work permits and paying the LMIAs and going through all that paperwork to keep them here on a work permit, because they won't be able to apply for permanent residence. In our program, we offer them the ability to apply for permanent residence and then a work permit to cover that gap without an LMIA. So it's much faster and it's much cheaper on businesses. And we kind of do a lot of the legwork on the other side. They fill out these forms. I work with their applicant or their employee to get all the documents possible and make it as easy as possible. I pride myself on making it as easy as I can and getting the best benefits for the businesses that I can. So that's my answer to that, and I can then give you some more clarifications if necessary.
Appreciate your answers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ward, for the presentation. I think I can speak to this from multiple sides, as my accent implies, but I'm not local. So I have been through the immigration process, and I've also been an employer looking to hire in the veterinarian field, specialists from overseas. This is a godsend. I have been through the LMIA process. We've lost people. We've had people turn away at the border because they could not get across. This is so much easier, and to have somebody guiding a business through the process, because it is horrendously complex, and not necessarily unjustly so, but it is complex, and there are reasons it needs to be that way. But to have somebody to handhold a business, and I think this would open it up to maybe businesses who are smaller and don't have an HR department, but are still looking for skilled workers, and I appreciate the focus that you have highlighted in bringing experienced workers who may be starting off working for one employer, but then potentially open up a business of their own and bring more employment into the area. So I'm assuming this will go to chambers of commerce in the area. Is there do you have a plan to disseminate this amongst the employers of Lake Country? Could you give me more detail on that?
Definitely. So we have someone, one of my colleagues, she has a marketing plan that we've been putting in place. So to be very kind of upfront with you, some of the funding that we've been looking for hasn't kind of materialized until recently. So because of that, we've been a little bit behind on disseminating the information as effectively as we'd like to. So we brought on someone who has a marketing plan and who's working through that. And she has plans to speak to all the chambers of commerce in the community and to kind of work on that side as much as possible. My job in this pilot mostly is to work with the businesses and to actually process the applications.
Right.
But also I'm presenting to whoever will have me as well.
I'm thinking at the moment of like 5 or 6 businesses off the top of my head that would be certainly interested in seeing what this could offer to them. So I think. And
with all one-on-one business questions and regarding specific applications, I'm the person to talk to, and I would be happy to speak to them directly and do whatever I could to get them to use the program, basically.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
How do they get in touch with you?
So there's a couple different ways. So I'm operating out of Community Futures, so all my information will be on the Community Futures website. Then we also have a website called arnip-vernon.ca. We will be changing that because obviously there's other communities, not just Vernon. So as of right now, it's arnip-vernon.ca. And there's a contact section on there that goes to me. And then also I have my business cards on me today, and I can give them.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Councillor McKenzie had a question.
Thanks, Ward, for that presentation. I also have a little bit of experience in this because we needed childcare when the kids were younger. And so we brought over a Filipino nanny and went through the whole process. And it took, I'm going to say about 7 to 8 months from start till somebody's at your doorstep.
For just a work permit?
To get somebody over. So it was a little bit of a lengthy process for sure. And then they end up living with you as well, right, as part of it. So they don't have to have that other part you're talking about with extra people kicking around. So, but it definitely was interesting to see. So I do like this. I just, the only thing I would say is we brought over somebody that had a food technology degree. I actually thought they were a cook at first, but I got corrected on that in a hurry. So they come over and they were quite happy to work at minimum wage because that was way more than what they were getting over in the Philippines. And they were actually able to send money back. So I found it interesting for that. So when I see the $25 thing, I see your goal seems to be looking for more skilled, even though sometimes the skilled are going to come in for less than what that is. So, like I say, we brought 2 people over and they're both residents here in Kelowna. So I do think there's a good program. I just don't know if it's maybe a little too limiting and you might have trouble when you're saying 500 people for one job, right?
Exactly. So just to answer that question. So if we look at how limiting it is, that was a big discussion. And at the end of the day, the committee voted that they would like to go this way, at least initially, to see if we can fill some of the endemic labor shortages in higher skilled, higher wage positions as well. There's an understanding on the committee as well that minimum wage positions, kind of lower wage positions, do not necessarily mean we bring in low skilled people. So there is that understanding. However, when we look at all the data that we received from the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Project and other communities involved in ARNIP, wage was a huge push or pull factor to certain communities. So the committee felt that it would be kind of prudent at this time to basically only bring in people who would be financially stable within the community. However, what we've seen is that it has definitely been limiting. And when you compound that with the effects of COVID, it's been even more limiting. And that's why we're having this meeting to look through all those criteria and possibly refocus it, because that is, you know, a good point, and we've heard it many times before. Yeah.
So yeah, I think one of your bigger limiting factors is going to be housing for these people, because they're coming over, and like I say, the fact they could walk into a house that had everything and here you go, here's your room, it's ready to go, that takes a lot out of there. So if you're bringing people over and expecting them to have all that or do all that, that's a whole nother challenge, right? So I would suggest that that's probably something you guys should look at. Right?
And we are. So the individuals who are currently abroad, we've recommended 3 of them who are outside of the community, and it'll take them, you know, the earliest one that'll be here is November. So what we're planning is to work with her to find housing, and we're trying to make partnerships within communities to help her with that. Some businesses have also actually have rental properties that they're, you know, they say they can commit to some of their potential employees and things like that. So, you know, those comments and those issues have definitely been raised on the committee, and those are things that we're looking into, because we understand how hard it can be, and we definitely don't want to set them off on the wrong foot, bring them here, they can't find housing and, you know, struggle. So we're trying to do the best we can on that, but it's still in its infancy, and we're learning as we go, and the government has given us the ability to readjust consistently. And that's what we're going to do here in the near future. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to wrap it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting and helpful, I hope, for people that can take advantage of the process and do get the money and funnel it this way.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Bylaws. Yep. Zoning amendment. No, public comment comes after this one. The zoning amendment.
Your Worship, this bylaw in front of you was given first and second reading on January 7th. A public hearing followed on February the 18th, 2020. And it's before council for third reading and adoption.
Councillor Scarrow moved. Councillor Gamble second. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Public comment. Does anybody wish to address council on any issue of concern? Do come forward, state your name. You got 3 minutes to make your case.
Hello, my name is Joel Weitzel from 12732 Oyama Road, and I'd like to submit a petition regarding the new Oyama Park.
Okay. Somebody Raina will take that. Very good. That's it. Thanks. All right. Anybody else wish to address council? Second time of asking? Third time of asking. Anybody else wish to address council? Hearing none, we'll move on then to development application for Cars Landing Road. You're doing that tonight.
Yes, I am.
It's a dazzle show.
Thank you.
I've seen that whole dazzle. Zigzag.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be presenting Development Permit 2020-008 with variance to you. We received and completed this application on April 8th, 2020. The zoning of the property is rural residential 2. The OCP designation is rural residential and parkland conservation. And the proposal is to develop a single-family dwelling with access and request a variance for water source. Here's the location of the property on Carr's Landing. It is approximately 1.69 hectares in size. Here's an aerial of the property. And then a site plan showing the development of a single family dwelling and access, and then just a zoomed in shot of that proposal, as well as the design drawings for the house itself. So just a quick summary of the variance. The variance is for the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. The variance requested is to change the regulations from servicing RR2 zones with the water distribution system to changing it to servicing RR2 zones with a water source. So switching it from municipal distribution system to a private water source, to be clear. So just a bit of background for the site. The site contains a legal non-conforming cherry orchard that was started in 1942, obviously much before our zoning bylaw. The property also contains a shed, a pump house, RV site, and tractor road. These elements are within the 30-meter buffer of the riparian area of Okanagan Lake. Both the QEP who completed the environmental assessment and Clark Geoscience did find a potential riparian corridor on the property. However, it was deemed that it did not meet the definition of a stream under the riparian area protection regulations. Hence, no riparian assessment was completed. Also, all the development is outside of the 30-meter buffer for riparian area. The applicant has a conditional water license from the province for the irrigation of the cherry orchard. They applied and received approval for an amendment to service the proposed dwelling in addition to the irrigation. The access has adequate fire staging and a turnaround area. The access was approved under access permit A 2020-037. More background information: in 2017, Barclay Road suffered a significant washout. This washout happened along drainage corridor parallel to the drainage corridor on site, which share a similar upland source. To address these drainage concerns, a culvert was added to the access. Staff will also consider the possibility of future drainage control measures on Carr's Landing Road adjacent to the site, and will collaborate with the applicant in this process. So currently, this site is not serviced by the municipal distribution water system. It would require an approximate 600-meter extension of the water main along Carr's Landing to bring the municipal water system up to the frontage of this property. This is an expensive option. Staff are currently developing a servicing strategy for Carr's Landing that would extend the water distribution system and may allow the property to connect in the future. The timeline for the servicing strategy and for this extension has not been determined, and staff feel it would be unreasonable to ask the applicant to wait for this undetermined amount of time to connect in the future for this water system. Staff would like to make council aware of the risks associated with private water sources. These risks include water quality as well as fire suppression. These risks are, of course, decreased when properties are connected to water distribution systems. So staff has assessed this property according to the development permit guidelines for the stability, erosion, and drainage hazard development permit area, the natural environment development permit area, and the greenhouse gas reduction and resource conservation development permit area. And staff has deemed that it meets most of the guidelines for these development permit areas. Staff recommends that the applicant be required to register a covenant for the future connection of the water distribution system. This is in order to mitigate the risks of water sources as previously mentioned. Staff supports the preferred option A to allow the use of a water source until the municipal infrastructure becomes available. Here are the comments from the CAO. And I'll ask the CEO if he has any additional comments in addition to these.
I think they're pretty clear, and council may have read them, and I'll just wait for the discussion if I need to add anything.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Reid. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just gonna finish up.
Sorry, I saw that.
No problem. So we have staff preferred, which is option A, is that the development permit for the single dwelling housing and access and the variance for the water source be approved prior to issuance, that security be provided. And I have a small amendment to this second and that section. Currently it reads, and that despite the variance for water source being granted with the property, the property must connect to municipal water source within 12 months of when the service is extended along the property frontage. I would like to amend that to include the covenants, so I would change it to, and that despite the variance for water source being granted, the applicant must register a covenant requiring the property to connect to municipal water source within 12 months of when the service is extended along the property frontage. And then to continue, and that the applicant is required to register a section 219 covenant for the water source prior to construction, and that the applicant has 5 months to meet these conditions with the possible extension of 3 months. Option B is that the development permit with variance allowing for the single dwelling housing and access be approved, and that prior to issuance the security be provided, and that the applicant be required to connect to the municipal water distribution system, and further that the applicant has 5 months to meet these conditions plus the 3-month extension. And then option C being that this development permit with variance be denied.
All right,
Thank you.
now you're done.
Now
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I have some questions around this proposal. There were a lot of contour maps provided with the report, and there are 3 that show the building site. All 3 are different. So the one that's attached to the Canyon Wren Consulting shows a pad, but also shows a building that is lower than the pad, so potentially within the RA. And then the plan that is attached to the topographic report shows a building envelope that extends very firmly into the RA. So as part of the Canyon Wren Consulting, it mentions that there is a figure 1 close-up of subject property with proposed development, high watermark, 30-meter buffer strip and property features. That is not attached to our reports. There is one that shows the pad with a 15-meter buffer strip. So I need something that actually confirms where this building is going to be placed, because I have 3 different positions in this report.
Yeah, of course. So the most recent and current site plan that I have on this file is this one. It was amended and attached to the environmental report because the previous one on that report was superseded. I had confirmation from the environmental consultant to make that change. So this plan is the most current.
Okay, because the one that's attached to the Schedule B building drawings shows the building being built in the middle of the orchard and within the 30-meter RA.
Sorry, is that Schedule B for the environmental assessment?
So that was just what was confusing me.
Yes, so again, with any reports provided to staff by the professionals, they usually do reflect the initial conditions. There is often back and forth between staff and the applicant asking for changes. So again, just saying that this is the most current plan that has been received and that amendments have been made to the reports. In this case, I may have missed to mark one of the older plans as superseded.
Okay, and thank you. That makes it much clearer for me. And then when they do the report, can it, put this politely, show what they say they're going to show? Because that one shows a 15-meter buffer and it's supposed to be a 30-meter buffer. So I just wonder if we could ask going forward when they're doing these things with the RAW, that it clearly shows for us. Well, for me personally, I'm not as technically au fait with all of this, so I would appreciate a really clear picture and that it makes it easier for me. So that clarifies it. I really appreciate that information. And my final question is, because the RV is in the buffer zone, is that going to get moved as part of the development permit? Because I think we have a 30-day limit on RVs being placed on property.
Yeah, so it's not an RV, or it is an RV site that was put there before the adoption of the zoning bylaw, hence it's legal non-conforming, so there's no intention of moving it at this point.
So an RV could stay there for 30 days or more? Could be placed there permanently?
That's a good question. So the RV site can stay there as legal non-conforming. The RVs moving to and from that site, I guess that'd be looked into further to be.
Other than that, I have no comments. I think it's a lovely design and yeah, I support the variance.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you for your presentation. I guess the question I have is if I read the report correctly, there's an existing water license. I imagine it comes from Okanagan Lake and it services the cherry orchard. The application to the province by the proponent was approved to include the house. So my question is, does they already have the infrastructure into the lake to irrigate the cherry orchard? Do they have to redo that infrastructure, make it larger in order to compensate for the water usage that the house will bring? Or is the existing infrastructure acceptable? Or do we know those answers?
Off the top of my head, I do not know those answers. I do know that there would be an extension required because I believe the current infrastructure runs from Okanagan Lake to the property, then south for irrigation. There would be a northward extension to the property to service the residents.
I guess my concern was more with what would happen within the lake, whether that pipe would need to be enlarged, extended, or changed.
I am not 100% sure at the moment, but that I'm assuming is something that would be addressed at the provincial level and not something that staff would look at.
Did have to have a license to take water from the lake?
Yes.
Yes. So that's all I need. Councillor Ara.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've got a couple concerns along the way here. No landscaping plan, so no restoration of the property. They're going to remove some trees. There's no guarantees of replanting. Normally in this kind of a proposal, we see what the landscaping is going to be and what sort of restoration is going to happen to the property. Not seeing anything. And then something else which I find really concerning and is the report, the environmental report says that the applicants indicated that none of these points are going to be addressed as part of the proposal, and that's every green initiative having to do with the building. So I find that really concerning, and with those two things there, I really can't support this. Normally I would, but it's got no landscaping plan, no plan to revegetate the property, and they're not willing to indicate any kind of green initiative whatsoever. So environmentally, I think it's the wrong way to go. I mean, they may have this plan, but it certainly says right in the report that the applicants indicated these points will not be addressed as part of the proposal. And, you know, climate change and the environment are an important part of any proposal. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Just to address the first half at least, there is a security required of $18,750 that will be used for the restoration of the cherry orchard to bring it to its original standing after development.
Landscaping.
Normally we see a plan for that and there's no
Yes.
plan. So, you know, it's all great to say that, but what's the plan? Landscaping could be anything for $18,000, right? You know, some developers think that throwing mulch and rocks down is landscaping. And so without a plan, I don't know what's gonna happen and I don't think the community does either.
Okay. I'll take Councillor Gamble before I go second. Councillor Gamble?
Well, I have considered this, and because it's not in the agricultural land reserve, and it is an active cherry orchard, and they are locating the house on the top portion. It seemed to me that there was adequate security to deal with this. I quite honestly, I did not see a problem with it. The only thing that I thought might be an issue was the drainage, but staff has said that is something they will be looking at in the building as that's progressing.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a lot of concern with it.
Thank you. Councillor Reid again.
Thank you. I hear what Councillor Arden says, and I suppose my one other thought would be, given that according to the report, because the orchard is legal non-conforming, it can't be expanded, but the property is being developed relatively in the middle of the cherry orchard. If the orchard can't be expanded, then effectively we are losing fruit trees because of the placement of the building. So it would lead to the question of what landscaping is going to be done and how can cherry trees be replaced if the orchard is not able to extend beyond its current footprint due to the legal non-conforming nature.
Thought they were higher, but Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, I would like to support this, but I just can't. So I'd like to see perhaps maybe that we defer this back to staff to bring that plan. Like, I don't want to just cancel it, but bring that plan. And I want to see some of the environmental things. Like, no, I'm sure not everybody's going to put rainwater restoration in, but they should. And we should be insisting on it, but we're not as committed to climate change as some of us would like to think. So I would make a motion to defer this to staff to come forward with the landscaping plan and explain the environmental problems. Not problems, but
Motion
address those.
Motion to defer. Those in favor? Councillor, it's moved. Councillor Ireland, Councillor Scarrow moved and second. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Your worship, there was a variance here. We should have asked for the public to raise
We'll
any
ask
issues.
them when it comes back. This is just.
Yeah, we
deferred.
can do that because this was a referral back to staff, so.
Yeah.
But just for future reference, we need to ask for public input.
That's it. Councillor Gamble?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment regarding Councillor Ireland's comments about, you know, the various suggestions of, well, in our development permit application that would encourage people to adopt much more environmentally friendly practices. And I do notice in many of the ones that come to us that people are not looking at ways to, you know, actually work with the environment in a better way. Just, you know, from, you know, the removal of trees, and I did notice here there were some removal of trees. Now, I think they're talking about cherry trees, but, you know, the thing is, and use of rain barrels, use of various things, tools that maybe we need to get more promotion out in the community of how important those things are and how they could be adopted quite easily. So I do support those things, and I did notice those things. I just wanted to point that out because I think it is important, and maybe we need to consistently take a little different approach to actually, precipitate a bit more change in this regard. It's probably not going to happen unless we really ask for it.
Well, in this case, the variance was to the water supply and at an existing
You're right.
orchard. So all of those other things were really not a part of, and I thought would be coming later too. But certainly we can defer and get some answers to those things that we were dealing with.
And I think I lost sight of that, and I appreciate you mentioning that because I think that was why I supported it, because the variance,
right,
to me made sense.
Yeah.
When it was
Yeah, I might remind, it's not just a variance. It's
Correct.
a development permit.
Correct.
With
Yeah.
the variance. So once this leaves here, this table, it's gone. So I would support the variance. I have no problem with the variance whatsoever. But
want to see what the development.
I want to see, yeah, I mean, $18,000 doesn't buy you very many plants. It certainly doesn't buy you a mature tree in any way. 2 ponderosa pines or,
Not even.
a 15-foot tree, that's about it. So it's not a lot of money.
Okay.
There's not restoration. And I agree with Councillor Gamble. We should be looking at this form and saying, how can we how can we get people to buy into this? Because I can tell you that rainwater recycling, because I look at this, because I actually do it at my house. I look at this checklist on everything, and in 6 years now, there's not one ever been checked, ever. So, and we live in a semi-arid area. So, we need to do a better job ourselves.
All right, thank you. It is deferred and staff knows what we want to see with regard to the development permit part of the file. So moving on to another development variance permit. Who's coming? Come ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This application is for the property at 11021 Okanagan Center Road West. And it is a development variance permit to facilitate the construction of an attached garage and a gym space. The property is OCP urban residential and zoned RU1 single family dwelling. It's located, as you can see, at the corner of Okanagan Center Road West, 8th Street and Maddock Avenue. This is the aerial of the home and also labeled front, rear, and the 2 side lot lines. In terms of background, as the residence was constructed prior to incorporation, the district does not have original records of construction. And as per the records available, no variances have been issued for this property to date. There is an existing single-family residence on the property with an attached carport for parking. And the proposal is to enclose the existing carport to create an attached garage for secure storage, as well as add a second story above the garage for gym space. There is to be no further ground disturbance beyond what already exists. The existing development is already non-conforming in terms of side and rear yard setbacks. However, given that the building is being altered, variances are required. A third variance for height is also required. This shows the main floor site plan, and The request is only to enclose the existing carport on the same footprint. It's not being expanded. And this is the upper floor site plan, which is all new construction and includes a gym and a deck. A couple of side images looking from Okanagan Center Road West. At the bottom left, looking from 8th Street at the existing carport, which is to be enclosed, and from Maddock Avenue, which is the rear lot line. The 3 requested variances are as follows. For the side yard setback along the south property line, from a minimum side yard of 2 meters to a minimum side yard of 1.76 meters. The rear yard setback along the east property line from a minimum side yard of 6 meters to 3.44 meters, and the height for the maximum height being the lesser of 9.5 meters or 2.5 stories to the lesser of 10.7 meters or 3 stories. Here are a couple of renderings. The top rendering shows the enclosed carport and the gym space on the 2nd story. And the bottom rendering is a view of the 2nd floor. These are the elevations looking from each of the 4 facades, and the pink block highlights the requested variance in terms of the height. This slide shows the contours and the context, and it's mainly to highlight the view corridors and that they will not be affected as a result of the additional story above the carport, given the steep rise for the property to the east. In terms of rationale for staff's preferred option of support, first, that there is no further ground disturbance, and the side and rear yard variances are only to enclose the existing carport and not to expand the footprint. Granting the side and rear yard variance also acknowledges and legitimizes the existing rear and side yard variances. And with regard to the height variance does not negatively impact any of the adjacent properties. And effectively, each portion of the home will remain at 2 stories. Upon this screen are the CEO's comments, and he may wish to comment on them. Just as a note, the planning and development team is working with administration to bring forward a zoning bylaw amendment to deal with how height is defined and other height issues. And this will reduce the number of variances that we will need to bring forward to council in the future.
Question? Councillor Scarrow. I'm going to ask for council questions first, then I'll get you to come to the microphone if you want to speak.
Okay, my concern is about the height. I have no problem with the side yard and backyard. You say it doesn't affect any of the view corridors. I definitely understand that, but it affects what Okanagan Center is, and it affects the kind of buildings and homes that we have on our beachfront there, immediately opposite the lake and the parkland that we have. And I am really hard pressed to support the height variance. The other two I can see because it's an existing and grandfathered in some ways, but you have to teach me why it is I should support the height variance in relation to what Okanagan Center is and what our vision is of it.
Yeah, she doesn't have to convince us. The plan does. All right. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also agree with Councillor Scarrow. I have no problem with enclosing the garage, but the height thing, I'm a firm believer of this is to solve a problem, and there is no problem here that I see, other than wanting to build something higher. And I agree, I do not, would not like to see something higher in that area. So if we can't make it work with what's there, I'm definitely not approving a variance on the height myself.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with my fellow councillors. I think side yard setbacks, because they are already existing, I don't have a problem with those. But the height variance, I mean, the lot is very small, and the neighbour to the south would go from a 12-foot high blank wall to a 28-foot high blank wall. And I do not think that is something that we should be supporting. I don't think there's a reason for the variance. I don't think this is designed to solve a problem. I don't think there is a problem. And the 20-foot high cedar hedge is on the, let me get this right, east side. So it does shield the property somewhat, but if for any reason, fire smart or whatever, that fence came down, you would have then another 28-foot high, virtually blank wall facing the streetscape. So I can understand the desire for this, but I cannot support the height variance. And it makes me a little worried when I hear that a zoning bylaw is coming that would allow these to go through without them coming to council. So I just hope we have some protection in that change for sight lines and neighbours, if we are changing it substantially.
Okay, I'll ask for anybody in the gallery wish to address this variance. Thank you, Blessy. Good presentation.
Hello all, Mayor, Council.
Yeah, name.
My name, oh no, I'm fine. Thank you. My name's Chris Nealon with Keith Construction, who is working on this project for Kathy Cahill and Randy Penny. We had completed the design in an effort to ultimately construct, and I'm here to hopefully get your support in all this. I appreciate the side yard and rear yard setback acknowledgement in that it is existing and will not be impacting very much at all, other than the construction to improve the foundation. However, the building height is in request. It is exceeding what the maximum would be of 4 feet approximately. I understand that 2.5 to 3 stories is ultimately in the definition, but the height itself at 35'2", rather than the requirement of 31'4" is ultimately the request. So if you guys are not looking to increase that height, is there something to be slightly higher but not as high as what you see here? You know, maybe it could be 33'2". It's ultimately in an effort to get that second story, to get appropriate space for gym and garage. With what the current allowance is, it would be very difficult to have a garage space work effectively as what would be nearly 7'2". But I understand that the request is going from 2.5 story to 3 story. Would we still be able to do something where we're maximizing the height and foregoing the 2.5 stories potentially?
That's up to council. The issue is whether we want to vary the height, and I'm certainly hearing that we don't want to. So,
well, some form of open discussion in us being able to create this space, whether if you're not in support of a 12-foot garage with the space above, you feel it may be too dominating. Is there an opportunity to say 9-foot garage with an 8-foot gym space above.
I'll hear from the CAO.
Well, really, this is not the venue to negotiate, I guess, between the applicant and council. But if council wishes to send this back to staff for discussion with the applicant about a different variance, we would entertain that as well. If there is an issue with the current status quo or the way the application is being presented, then I would suggest that probably you need more time to consider it, and probably give time to staff to talk to the applicant and find different solutions.
Okay, thank you. I'll take Councillor Gamble.
Well, I don't feel that I am, the expert in terms of figuring out different, solutions to the building structure. I know myself, I totally agree with the comments that the other councillors have mentioned, that it is not an appropriate height. And so I stand by that.
Okay.
I think that
I got a couple of other speakers.
to accommodate the structure, the actual activity that the owner is proposing, it may mean that the house has to be, changed.
Okay.
The construction of the house.
I'll see what Councillor Blair or Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the height variance either, the side yard setback and everything. I'm fine with that. But I see a possible solution that might not be what the people want, but it certainly avoids the height variance by building a much larger garage, because there's quite a bit of space there. It's a poured concrete pad that goes right out to the road. So could that garage double in size, incorporating a gym in the back of it?
Without major renovation to the existing building, it certainly could, but entrances, living rooms, kitchens, and everything.
You're going to rip a roof off and put a. Anyways, I won't debate it with you.
So sorry.
I'm giving it an option.
Right.
You're ripping a roof off, you pour an extra bit of foundation.
Right. And I mean, the consideration is for us to utilize the space, within the footprint that was kind of our main focus there. And, limit the impact of the overall environment around.
Thank you. Councillor Scarrow, and then.
Second time around, I appreciate that offer, sir. No, the height variance in my mind is two things. First, the variance itself is to solve a problem that can't be solved because the round peg doesn't fit in the square hole. I agree with Councillor McKenzie. The problem here is not magnanimous. Having a gym above your garage is not a necessary thing, especially considering there is options. I don't want Okanagan Centre to have the precedent of a 3-story or even just 4 feet higher building, especially in the prominent area that this particular 3 lots is, which is in the corner of Maddock and about downtown Okanagan Centre. It's about downtown as you can get. If we start with that kind of a variance, then all of a sudden, there's probably going to be many more applications for similar things. They may not be gymnasiums, but they will be higher buildings. And they will point at that one and say, this is why I'm applying for this. So I'm going to suggest, for your benefit, that we refer this back to staff, and you come to us with a plan that doesn't require a height variance or a very, very minimal height variance. And that's going to be my recommendation, and I would make that motion, sir, if it's available to me.
To defer, certainly.
Defer to staff to come back with a more compatible plan to what Okanagan Centre should be.
Okay. Seconded. Do we hear from the gallery on our motion? Yeah.
Thank you. Are you potentially implying that the 3-story then still be an option, a viable option for us to look into those avenues? Because
I'm saving you money by not having to pay the reapplication process by deferring it back to staff so that you could come. You've heard what we all had to say. You know what we all think.
Right.
So now make a plan that works.
Okay.
That sounds great. I would appreciate if anyone else could provide comment then on if we were to stay within the building height overall requirement, but still look to a third story potentially there.
Councillor Kenzie, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This variance on height is something there that this council is definitely doesn't want to vary on. So if you can stay within that height of there and have 3 stories, you can probably get it approved. But there's, you know, from what we're hearing here, it's not going to go through under the higher one because it doesn't fit the form and character of that area. So if you can say, for instance, take Councillor Ireland's suggestion and come up with a different plan there, I would think that we could probably be more accommodating. But I don't think, personally, I don't think that you're going to get a variance through based on what we've heard here today.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Councillor Reid will wrap it. Oh, no, Councillor Ireland will wrap, but go ahead, Councillor Reid.
I would echo what Councillor Mackenzie said. I would not approve the height variance based on the physical measure, given that the variance is from the ground, is from the basement to the top, not from not from the pad to the top. You know, you're talking about the height of the entire house. So if you can make a 3rd story within the existing 9.7 from the basement to the top of the roof line, then that's something that I certainly would at least look at. But I'm not feeling that I can, given things everybody said about the character of the area, the proximity of your neighbours, the side yard setback that we're already saying is okay, I wouldn't approve a height variance based on physical height.
Again,
Thank you.
Let Councillor Ireland wrap it and give you his thoughts.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with those comments. The other thing I might say is that it's all well and fine to say that this is going to be a gym space. But if I was to buy that house after this was built, and I don't want a gym, it's a bedroom and it's extra occupation that the septic and all those things aren't designed for. So, or it's an Airbnb bedroom, which there are several of along that way. So I have a bit of a issue with that, but it's the height variance that's the most important part.
Okay.
It is accessed directly through the garage, so it would not see that same opportunity for an outside access for Airbnb, nor would you want to rent something that has access through. So I think that would be considered likelihood that it would not become that.
All right, I'll ask if
Your
anybody.
worship, can I clarify the motion? So what I hear is that this application be referred back to staff to work with the applicant to review the plans to not include an increased height.
Yeah.
In keeping with the Okanagan Center character.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. This is a variance. But it's being deferred, and you can work with staff.
Great. Thank you.
Get back at our next COVID council meeting, I suppose. Well, or close to that. I'm not sure where the file goes from here, but yeah, you'll be in touch.
Best to talk with Blessy, I assume, on that?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And another development permit application. You're up. No variance this time. All right.
Mayor and Council, this property is located at 3590 Reddicup Road. and it is a development permit application for a multifamily development. The property is OCP'd high density residential, and it is zoned RM2 low density row housing. It's the location of the subject property, and it is 0.17 hectares. A closer up aerial view and a rendering showing the neighborhood and the context. In terms of background, the district records indicate that a single-family residence was demolished in 2015 and replaced with a modular home. The current homeowner bought the property in 2018 and has since relocated the modular home, decommissioned the 2 wells on the property, as well as demolished the accessory buildings on site. So it is a vacant site at present. Council approved zoning amendment to change the zone from RU1 single-family residential to RM2 low-density rural housing on August 18th of this year. This is a recent site image of the vacant lot. A site plan showing the driveway in from Reddicup Road as well as the 2 buildings with 3 units each. The property is located within the Woodsdale neighborhood, which is an area experiencing significant growth with access to natural amenities, including Wood Lake, the Okanagan Rail Trail, as well as Beasley Park. And as the neighborhood continues to develop, walkability is also improving with easier access to commercial areas, parks, public transit, as well as the town center. This proposal is for 2 buildings of 3 units each, including a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units for a total of 6 units, and buffering using screening and vegetation, and the setback from Reddicup Road enables the development to integrate with the neighborhood. A central green space and community garden provides a gathering space and an open space for the residents. And the majority of the multiple unit and greenhouse gas development permit guidelines have been met. This is the landscape plan showing the buffering from Reddicup Road as well as the community gardens and the open space, shared open space in between the 2 buildings, as well as private open spaces behind each of the units. This slide provides the CEO comments, and they are also included on page 2 of the staff report. Preferred staff option is that development permit be approved, allowing for the 6 units of multiple dwelling housing, and that prior to issuance, a $29,903.75 security bond be submitted to the district within 5 months of today. And option B is that the development permit be denied.
Any questions? Any comments? Yeah, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Blessy. I was wondering whether it would be possible to take a look at the parking arrangements that are proposed. The proposal says that there's going to be 12 spaces. I can only count 11, though I do note that our building guidelines require 10.5 for the number of units that they have. So I'm just wondering, where's the missing 12th space? And I have to say, the fact that 2 of the units don't have any garage at all, and then 2 of the units have these linear garages, which from experience, just don't work as 2 cars. They work as 1 car and a load of stuff that everybody carries around with them in their lives. So poor unit 5, if they have 2 people living in that with 2 cars, that's going to end up on the road. Unit 1 and 3, if they have 2 people with 2 cars, those are going to end up on the road as well because there is no garage in there. So I know we've approved it and councillor stands by that, but that's number 11, the visitor parking. So I just, Oh, I get 11, but yeah, I just think we're just encouraging cars to be on the road in a built-up area, and I appreciate the developer coming in with no variance. I think that's well done them for that. And the view from the Redcop roadside is of a blank wall is not particularly attractive, but I can understand why they did it. But yeah, not super impressed.
Anybody else? Councillor Campbell?
Thank you. I do recall the applicant saying that this was a property that was intended for rental accommodation, which is something that is much needed in our community. These are small units, and definitely the parking is much less. But I did look at quite a creative use, I thought, of the greener space in that community. While it's not large, it's very attractively designed, and certainly would, I think, fit the purposes intended. So I think they've made quite an effort. It is the one that I have seen that has at least ticked off one of those environmental boxes by having an attempt at some community gardens, and I like to see that. That's the first time I've seen that for a while. So I would support this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Koza.
I said it before and I'll say it again. I think we're in for a real bit of trouble with the water issues. The engineers with all the tickets can tell us whatever they want, but my feet tell me a different story when I walk in our back pastures. So I can't support this.
Thank you. Reina, you want to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have the Director of Planning and Development on the line who would like to make some comments regarding parking.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just wanted to quickly jump in with respect to the parking matter. Now, when we're looking at this proposal, council's development permit guidelines do not necessarily speak to whether or not that parking could be tandem or not. So in this case, from the development permit consideration, it meets the majority of council's development permit guidelines, and the parking decision was technically made at the zoning level when they've been outlined as having a certain amount of parking required per the development. Now, in terms of additional parking being added to the site, that may be perceived to be actually going contrary to some of council's greenhouse gas reduction development permit guidelines with respect to permeable area, less heat island effect, and so on. So in light of the fact that this is aligned with the majority of council's DP guidelines, staff were in favor, and I would just speak to that is truly what council must consider at this point. With respect to drainage, for example, that will be considered at site servicing and further at the building permit stages, as well as has been considered already through the existing studies. So we do need to put the majority of our consideration to the development permit matters at hand. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Clarification. Thank you. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Gamble on those issues. Yeah, I mean, the parking is not ideal, but these rental units are sorely needed in the area. And quite frankly, I don't think we've seen many projects that have tried to put in a little bit of green space for the people. And I think that we just don't see enough of that. The fact that there's green space and a community garden together, I think they're making a real effort to build a nice spot, given the parameters of the size of the lot and those sort of things. So yeah, whilst the tandem parking isn't great, there are 12 parking spots, by the way. I was struggling to see where you couldn't find the other one because I'm thinking, am I stupid? Or I mean, I know I'm stupid, but how stupid am I? Anyways, I would support this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scarrow. We're going to hear
I
from
don't quite know how to follow that last comment. Okay, well, I guess I can talk a little bit about, I agree with Councillor Gamble by all means that this project does offer us a little bit more green space, does offer some rental to perhaps the demographic that may not have as many cars as others. The fact that it's in an area that we wish to densify through our OCP, and that it's on public transit, and that it has rail trail and many other walkability type of things, I think maybe you'll find the parking that Councillor Reid brought up suffering a little bit less pressure. Right? So I agree with Councillor Ireland and Councillor Gamble that the green space is nice, and I intend to support this.
Okay, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for that report, Leslie. I do agree with our three veterans, we'll say. The only question I would have, actually, our CAO is probably easiest to answer this, because Jamie said the same comment. When, you know, we're focusing on form and character, which I get, but you have a comment that says, considering that rezoning was approved and DP criteria are mostly met, I'm just curious what exactly is missing on that from that comment.
Well, if you go through the list of the DP criteria, some boxes are checked as in compliance, I guess, and some boxes are not. And so, but the majority of those that are in compliance are there, and therefore, I mean, the staff has the doesn't have the authority to say no, you deny that. But council has the prerogative, so you can either approve, notwithstanding the fact that there is a majority of those checkbox actually ticked, and or not. So I would say that you know, form and character are kind of subjective in a way, until or unless we change the guidelines in our OCP. This is what we have, and so if we had to follow the current guidelines, we can only offer support for the application at this point because the majority of those criteria have been met.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing something else. So I am comfortable with this one as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Can I just ask a question? It mentions that the building has a green roof or a living wall, and I just wondered, I haven't seen those before, so I'm wondering whether it would be possible to talk to those as to how they're.
We were not provided any more details on that. I know the applicant is online attending remotely. She may wish to speak to that.
Can that happen, Raina?
Jaylene, can you hear us? Are you available?
I can, yes. I'm happy to answer that. Unfortunately, the development does not include a green roof, and that was an error.
All right.
So my apologies for that confusion. Green roofs and green walls can actually be quite tricky to maintain in the long term, so they're best left avoided in many cases, especially in hot areas.
So can I just check in on the other ones around the climate focus? Building materials encouraging thermal massing and seasonal thermal energy storage. Is that included?
So with respect to the building materials, the colors that have been chosen, so primarily white with some black and gray accents, is to reduce the heat island effect, as well as the materials of fiber cement siding and metal siding have been chosen for their durability and long-lasting effect, both aesthetically and physically.
But they're not actually thermal massing or doing the seasonal thermal energy storing by storing and then releasing the energy back into the internals of the building.
No, but they do have an impact on the heat island effect that materials and paving can have in development.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I need a motion. Councillor Gamble, Councillor Ireland, those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Bessie. I think those other ones you want to do as a bunch? No. We just dealt with them, but carry on. UBCM, Community Resilient Grant, should we turn it down? Thank you, Councillor Scarrow, I appreciate it. Bill moved it, I second. Bill moved. Councillor Ireland, second. Those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one.
There we go, thank you. It is extremely important to protect our community from wildfire. I would just like to say that. Thank you.
We got to go for it. Yeah. Are you going to do all the rest?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one being as easy as that one.
Need a motion read a third time as amended. Councillor Scarrow, Councillor Reid, those in favour?
Well, there is a question, Your Worship. Councillor Reid wants to ask a question.
Oh, Reid. Yeah.
So thank you, Director Salmon. And I know this came before Council on 2 strategy sessions, and you know what I'm going to ask. So when we talked about it at the strategy session, we agreed the 300 meters, and we spoke about the density being converted into single family units around 80. And I know we had a conversation about this would now get incorporated into the zoning bylaw as a more appropriate place for that kind of consideration to take place. I'm just wondering when that is going to be done, and will it specifically take into account the safety concerns around a cul-de-sac, as it would, if it was just left to be defined by the surrounding zoning, potentially you could have 200, 300 units on a 300 meter cul-de-sac if you were in a high density residential area. So just on the safety side, putting a cap on the cul-de-sac density through the zoning bylaw and the timing of that.
Okay, probably that question is more for Mr. McEwen than Mr. Salmon.
Okay.
You there, Jamie?
I am, yeah, just upstairs in the upstairs time zone. Yeah, thank you for your question. And through further investigation and research, we obviously know that densities on cul-de-sacs is a concern for council. However, the best legal venue for that is the zoning bylaw. So council may start to sense a pattern here that we are identifying a number of zoning matters that we're looking to bring forward to council. Height being one, parking being another discussion we want to have, and matters such as this. And the zoning bylaw would be the legal avenue for us to best address this, and it wouldn't fit quite well within the SDS, and I think could in fact be quite legally challengeable in terms of restricting densities. Luckily, we don't have a tremendous amount of high density like multifamily at the end of cul-de-sacs, but regardless, we just spoke about the importance of wildfires. This is something that we need to take into consideration. We do hope to bring forward some of the zoning bylaw amendments, starting to parse them out into November, December of this year. So
would that include the density of the cul-de-sacs? Is that in that, would that be within that timeline?
We'll look at trying to do that. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll prioritize that given the sensitivity of council to this matter.
Okay, so while those two processes are running, and we've approved the SDS with no density requirements on cul-de-sacs, what would happen if a developer put in an application between now and the zoning bylaw coming before council?
Your worship, with the and this is where it gets into the legalities of zoning and land use. With respect to someone already being pre-zoned for development, it's really they have a right to that development. It comes down to meeting the form and character aspects of the DP. as we just discussed. So with that, I guess the only comfort that I could give to council is that it's probably illegal to do it in the SDS and or ultra virus, so outside of our powers to control density in the SDS, and this is what we've uncovered through further investigation. And it is best left to the zoning bylaw, but we will prioritize that.
So there is a window of opportunity for the next couple of months for somebody to come in and put in a cul-de-sac in a high density area with no density requirements.
You know, I guess on that, what we would be looking at is the fact that how likely is it, and how much of a issue is it right now? So let's say like a hypothetical RM5 multi-story highest density residential building was proposed at the end of a cul-de-sac. We don't presently have one of those I can think of off the top of my head in terms of us being exposed in that way, which would then result in a like a high density tendril at the end of a long cul-de-sac. So I think our risk exposure in that regard is quite low. However, we do also have to be sensitive to the legalities of where and how we can bring forward the regulations for density, which is mandated to be effectively through zoning bylaw.
Thank you. The CAO?
Yeah, just to clarify, all applications must be reviewed and approved by council. It doesn't matter what the bylaw says. If you're not comfortable with something, you have the opportunity to deny the application. It's a full discretion of council. That's a legal stance of the courts, and there's not much the applicants can do. So I would say that I can't speak to the likelihood to have an application in November before there is an amendment to the zoning bylaw, but I can tell you that if there is an application that comes in November of that nature, then council has full power to either approve or deny it.
Thank you. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just more of a technical, it's a question. In B 4.5, I'm not sure we discussed this, we might have, and I might just be an idiot again. That'd be twice in one night. B 4.5, the district engineer in their sole discretion may approve the issuance of a building permit in advance of the off-site work having been completed, provided that a valid servicing agreement with the security for works is in place, and that the signatories to the servicing agreement and building permit are one and the same. So I just like an explanation what that might be. So how does that, an example maybe?
So traditionally what happens is that in order to proceed with on-site work, you have to complete your off-sites first. Mm-hmm. So in terms of, and I guess the main reason for that is to ensure that we don't end up with a development that's partially built and people start to move in and the servicing requirements haven't been met. So the sidewalk hasn't been put in, the road hasn't been upgraded, restored, whatever it needs to be, but there's people still living there. So traditionally what happens is that you complete your off-site work first, i.e. the district portion, and then you get the service agreement and then you're allowed to develop on-site. But there are instances where there are lots that are fully serviced, where it may be beneficial to allow the development to actually proceed on-site first, and then do the off-site second, or do them concurrently, depending on the situation. And usually when they are less impactful to the neighbourhood. But also there may be instances where there's multiple developments going on. It makes sense for those upgrades to be all done at the same time, rather than coming on, having a whole bunch of disruption. Then they can go and do their on-sites, and then the next developer comes along, does his half of the road, right? So there may be instances where it's beneficial to the community to allow the off-sites to happen before the on-sites.
Okay.
Alrighty, so but how about the regulation of the building permit itself? I mean, if this is the district engineer approving the building permit.
No, because one of the
issuance of the building permit.
Because one of the conditions of an issuance of building permit is the off-sites are complete.
Yeah.
So once we say the off-sites are complete, then I can then give the building department authorization to release that building permit.
So it still goes through the building
Oh, yes.
inspector and all, and that plan?
Yeah.
You're just telling them that, hey, in this case, it's okay?
It's just a step in the process.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just trying to understand.
Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for that presentation. We've seen this one a couple times before, so thank you for updating it. I also shared the same concerns with the length there, so my question was actually asked, but I just want to make sure that that one is taken care of with the bylaw, so I'll just echo those comments, so thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Gamble.
Oh, thank you. One thing is just to talk about the cul-de-sac. I certainly was not keen on this to start with, but we did have quite a bit of discussion, and I'm much more comfortable with the addition of the greater than 200 meters. There must be an emergency egress, and that egress must be a road. Is that not correct?
Yes, there are specifications for the egress as well. When you look into the bylaw itself, you know, it has to be hard surface, then it has to be of a certain width. So there are specifications for the egress.
Okay, that's great. Now, the other question that I had, and I don't recall a lot of discussion about that, but we're talking subdivision and development servicing. Maybe this is the wrong place for the discussion, but we've run into a number of issues that I thought were cleared up when we changed our zoning, updated it. That is grade, identifying the pre-built grade. And where is that? Where is that? This is in subdivision and servicing, and it has come up in a number of applications where the proponent has actually filled and said that was the pre-built grade. And it, you know, it's happened to us on a big development that was very prominent in the community, that really had a big impact on neighbors, and other ones. So does that fit into this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, yeah, and I do believe that it's not dealt at the SDS stage in terms of, I think it's part of the development permit stage, and I'm looking to the.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're still working on grade. I think that we're coming to some way of determining what grade is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not one of these amendments, so that's why.
No, I know it's not, but should it be, is what I'm asking.
Well, it hasn't been, these are ones that been worked on, we know, and we agreed on when we had the strategy sessions on these.
So we can adjust this if necessary.
Well, they will amend the development servicing bylaw. Grade was even a greater issue, and it came up later, I think, than in those sessions where we developed a lot of this. And it's still being worked on, so you're not seeing it tonight. So we're not discussing it tonight.
My question was, is this where it should be adjusted? Because we've heard that zoning was the place. We thought it was fixed.
Well, let's see where they bring it back. I mean, we're not discussing grade tonight. Let's just discuss the ones we've got.
So, Your Worship, maybe the manager of planning can clarify, or Jamie, but Corey's coming to the podium, so
yes, we'll hear
let's give her an opportunity.
Development of manager.
Mr. Mayor. I think there's an opportunity here to understand how all of the bylaws come together. And so we've been discussing a number of things. Grade we've discussed in the context of the definitions contained within the zoning bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
Those, of course, need to be considered in tandem with the subdivision development servicing bylaw in due course.
Mm-hmm.
But we will also be having a conversation about establishing grade when you consider a new development approval procedures bylaw and some of the requirements with various types of applications, what kind of information do we need to receive at the outset, and then have the ability to then apply the zoning bylaw, the subdivision development servicing bylaw to those considerations. And that will come as a more comprehensive package at a later time.
Thank you. That clarifies it. Thank you. And Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, this might tie in a little tiny bit.
Can you turn on the mic, please?
Sorry. It's section D12, and it's talking about the, I mean, I don't know if you can see it there quickly, Matthew, or not, or I can read it out.
Yeah, please.
Okay, pursuant to section 86 of the Land Title Act, the approving officer may at their sole discretion require a report certified by a professional engineer or geoscientist experienced in geotechnical engineering stating that the land may be used safely for the use intended, and or require one of the more covenants under section 219 of the Land Title Act in respect to any of the parcels that are being created for subdivision, by the subdivision. And in the comments at the bottom of it, I totally 100% with that, but the comments in the bottom, I just don't understand how it can, it's obviously, the comments say, the addition of this clause invokes the ability of the approving officer to require geotechnical reporting and assurance that the land may be used safely for the use intended, great, and for the approving officer to require S219 restrictive covenants on parcels in order to prohibit further modification of the lot grading on parcel after registration of the subdivision. This is a response to numerous issues with lot grading and post subdivision, which then has unintended negative consequences for adjacent properties and or public rights of way, especially in terms of drainage and stormwater. So is it just through those covenants of section 219 that you're able to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand exactly how that happened. So, I mean, I think it's a positive, don't get me wrong.
So that, I mean,
and it kind of ties into our discussion of grade.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, that slipped my mind actually. We did actually go with that specific issue to our legal counsel. So how do we resolve this? How do we mitigate this in this bylaw? Obviously, you've heard that some other mechanisms that we can use that will be coming at a later date. But right now, we've got an opportunity to update the SDS bylaw. So what can we put in here now, which is appropriate for the SDS bylaw, that gives us greater control over grade, and and specifically in this issue, once the grading's been done, it then being changed afterwards, and whether that's during building or development, or whether someone moves in and then landscapes and changes the grade and therefore alters how the drainage works and all that stuff. So in those susceptible areas, high erosion soils, thinking Lakestone now really, but we can put covenants on those tiles that say that you cannot change the grading on your lot.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great, because you often in these major subdivisions, one company comes in and they create the lots, but that's all they do. Then they sell those lots to different developers and they build little houses and they regrade them and they do all these things and they try to lift up one house over the other and all that sort of thing. So I'm glad that we've got protection in our subdivisions for grade, and we just have to work out a system to protect
Can we
housing.
get back to cul-de-sacs now and move this thing? We're not doing great tonight.
Actually, Your Worship,
Yeah, no.
Your Worship is already moved and seconded.
Moved and seconded. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Read as amended. All right. Thank you. Let's get on to council procedures.
Your Worship, we have a number of bylaws here for adoption. We'll start with these were all given 3 readings previously. The first one is council procedure amendment bylaw.
Moved and second, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Scarrow. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And
The second one is stormwater management bylaw.
Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Scarrow. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Next, we have the development application procedure amendment bylaw.
And that be Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Ireland. And those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Then we have the bylaw notice enforcement and MTI amendment with respect to stormwater management and development permit bylaw.
And that's first, second, third, and adoption. Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Scarrow. Those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
And lastly, Your Worship, it's the fees amendment bylaw.
And Councillor Scarrow moves, Councillor McKenzie second. Those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. We could have done that half an hour ago if Penny didn't raise grade, but.
Doesn't matter. We got to do the work. Can I ask Raina a question?
Yeah, Raina?
We've already voted on it, but in the stormwater management bylaw fines penalty section, so those are the maximum penalties that we can.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's correct. Those are the maximum. I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe.
So it's only $500 to obstruct a water course.
500 is the max for bylaw notice enforcement and 1,000 is the maximum for MTIs. So if
it's only $500 to enclose a water course.
But if you're in a park and you destroy a bull elk, it's $100,000 or so.
It's only $500 to discharge waste.
Yeah.
Into a water course.
It's under legislation, unfortunately.
No, I'm sure it was. I just wanted to confirm.
It's been a long time to get.
And I just wanted to call attention to the ridiculousness.
500 per day.
All right, we have report from in camera. Are you doing that, Raina, corporate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is just on the agenda for information to be brought forward from the in-camera meeting. No action required.
All right, authorized to clean up. And council committees, economic development and tourism committee meetings, minutes, nothing, no action. Information item, no action. Councillor items, start with Councillor Reid tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to say that the Cars Landing Community and Recreation Association is having their AGM via Google something or others, but kind of like Zoom. They're just working on the technicalities, but that is going to be on the 21st of October. And also in the evening, 7 p.m. I would also like to just mention that one of the members of the Access and Age Friendly Committee, Mr. Edward Dodson, passed away during this late summer. He was a long-term member of the committee and much respected in the community, and I just wanted to say thank you to his family for his service that they were able to make time for, and to pass on our sympathies and condolences. He sounded like an amazing human being, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor McKenzie and the jewel of the Okanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just say I spent some time in Okanagan Center today and was surprised at how nice and quaint and quiet it was. And there, at this time of year, it was way different than I was there a couple months ago. So in the jewel of the Okanagan, I just want to acknowledge all the community hall members that were out, including myself, raking the infield of the ball field, repairing it after our little floods. So it's nice to see that getting up and going. And there was interest with the community hall in hosting small people's baseball, which we had talked about earlier. So that's something we definitely should talk to Sean and get that talked about. It would be nice to have baseball for little kids in our community. And then I also want to acknowledge and thanks the businesses in Oyama that all participated in my wife's run this year. Instead of a run for the cure, it was a bike for the cure. So she raised $5,400 on Sunday and had 45 people go around the lake, around Wood Lake on their bikes. She's raised just over $30,000 for cancer now, so quite proud of her for that. And I just want to acknowledge that Just about every business in Oyama contributed. The Oyama zip line, the yacht club, the general store, the OKF Grill, Gatski's, and Pedigo Bikes all contributed. So I just want to acknowledge that they're all part of that amount. So good to see that there's some good things going on in our community.
Thank you. Councillor Arlen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, a big shout out to Tina. That's incredible. That's a well done, $5,400. That's fantastic. Nothing much going on in Okanagan Center, as Councillor McKenzie alluded. It's been a little quiet, which is nice. It's that nice time of year. But I'd just like to just say how disappointed I am in the regional district for defunding. You know, they're doing it over time, but they're defunding the Friends of Fintry. And I think once again, the regional district is demonstrating their lack of accountability to people in the community. I mean, it's almost like it's Kelowna's regional district and not the communities, because did I say that out loud? Well, I'm saying it out loud because just because Fintry Park is not in Kelowna, the Friends of Fintry have done an incredible job preserving the history of the building that's there and that area and our community. And it's an incredibly good attraction. And for the measly small amount that the regional district funded them, if they think that that's giving them savings, they must be, I don't know what they're doing with it, but it wouldn't amount to much. So I find it very disappointing. And, you know, it would be kind of like, don't defund the police, defund the regional district.
Thank you, Mike. And Councillor Scarrow.
Well, I certainly don't have much to say, but I just wanted to give my kudos or a shout out to the managers of the District of Lake Country. I very much enjoyed the younger youth making presentations to our council, and I think it's good for our succession program, and I think that I would encourage more of that, especially that guy with the cool shirt.
Councillor Koza.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to thank Mr. Unser for assuring me that the ditches are going to be cleaned in the Woodsdale Flats. It's good to know that we'll be able to clear the water out. My fear, though, is that we're going to develop it in a way that the water will have no place to go. And I will keep bringing that up, and I will keep bringing it up, and I will become a broken record on that topic. But not that I don't want to see development happen, it's just that I have a real concern that we're going to put ourselves in a bad spot. And it won't be us that'll have to deal with it. It'll be the future generations that will have to deal with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, I want to again thank Malcolm Mitchell for many, many years of service. He served for many years on the Winfield Okanagan Centre Water Board long before 25 years ago when I believe that's when he got on the Water Committee.
Irrigation District.
Yes, he served for the Irrigation District for many years before getting on the district's water board. Yes, long before incorporation. I would imagine more than 40 years. A lot of service. Yes, your whole life. Yes, so I just wanted to thank him again for such dedicated service to the community. I'm sure we'll miss his expertise, and hopefully he will still contribute as he's able. But I also wanted to thank the community for supporting my virtual attendance at UBCM this last week, which enabled one of the highlights for me was to listen to an hour-long interview with Margaret Atwood. And I've often thought that she's a really unusual writer, and I can't always watch her shows, but I will tell you that I was spellbound by the discussion and the interview. Spellbound. It was wonderful. And one of the things I wrote some notes, one of the things she said was, local government can make a difference by acting beneficially to make changes with how we act. And then she said, what is it that will benefit us that will also benefit the planet? And I see that the regulation on plastic bags is changing, so it is going to come back. So maybe we can put that on our agenda. And one of the other things she said is that, I'll just mention a couple of these things. It was absolutely fascinating. That there are currently 3 crises that we're dealing with in society that are huge. First one is climate change. The second one is COVID-19. And the third one is income, economic inequity, which means the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And this is creating social problems. The other thing is that she talked a lot about, indirectly and but directly, about democracy and the 4 elements of democracy that we all have to prize and make sure that we look after. First one is free press. The second one is an executive arm of government. The third one is an independent judiciary, judges, you might be thinking. And the fourth one is free voting. And if you look south of the border, I think all 4 of those might be in jeopardy. So something to think about. Anyways, it was absolutely worth every second that I listened. And thank you very much for sending me. It opened my eyes. A true Canadian, Margaret Atwood. We can all be very proud of her.
Thank you. And you've stirred up people because Councillor McKenzie wants a second go.
Yeah, I also would like to say thanks for attending UBCM virtually as well, even though it's not exactly what I would suggest is the greatest. I would rather be there in person and talking to people around the province. So, but I did actually forget to thank Woody's Pub because they were also contributed to the thing, to the cancer. So I know my friend Corey would probably be upset if he heard me missing him.
Thank you. And Councillor Ireland wants a second go around.
Yeah, I missed out on saying thanks to the community as well. And I would 100% agree with Councillor Gamble about Margaret Atwood's speech. It was fantastic. I mean, if there was ever a person that could bring in environmentalism to the basics of what we need to do instead of dancing around with all the technical issues, she was great. And there was one comment that was made that's pretty relevant to what's going on right now, because there's lots of businesses and there's lots of people saying, with COVID, we need to put the environment on the back burner. It has to be put on the side because we need to solve our economic conditions. And Margaret Atwood said, I have a stove with 2 burners at the front. So I think pretty much everybody has a stove with 2 burners at the front, at least. So no, you can't put COVID, you can't put the environment at the side. It needs to be right up the front, because there's this thing called the ocean, and 60% of our oxygen comes from the ocean. So if we kill the ocean, we kill ourselves. It was a phenomenal speech. So thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Gamble for bringing that up.
Well, after everybody has spoken, I just want to say I did send a letter of thank you to Malcolm Mitchell for his retirement. We haven't seen him for some time, but did serve very well. And I did send a letter of condolences to Edward Dodson's family, and also to the Gatsky family in the passing of Helen Gatsky. She was our longtime representative on the school district and was a founder of the Lake Country Heritage and Cultural Society, served on the museum board for a long time. So it's unfortunate that all these good people are dying when we can't have a celebration of their life in any kind of gathering. But we did, on behalf of Mayor and Council, condolence cards to those that had served us long and well. And on that, we say good night. We are adjourned. Yeah.